Hello, and welcome to the Class 27 video. Today we are covering doubt, bullshit, and propaganda. This is the last class session in the social epistemology section where we will be covering new content. Class 28 is the practice test, and Class 29 is the real unit test. The final exam is the week after that. It will be twice the length of the unit tests and cover the full course. So, in the social epistemology section, we've been spending a lot of time looking at what happens when members of a group are operating in bad faith and how that disrupts the attempt to reason in groups. The topic of bad faith was covered in Class 25, and in Class 26, we looked at three tactics used by bad faith operators: gaslighting, concern trolling, and sea lioning. Today we're going to look at three more techniques: doubt, bullshit, and propaganda. Before we do that, though, I want to look at an example and do an exercise about it. And for the online students, you will be watching part one of this video, then watching the short clip from from the social media platform formerly known as Twitter that gives the example itself, and then doing the exercise. After the exercise, you should come back to this video and I will talk about how the concepts for today's class apply to the video. Okay, the example here is from the aftermath of the 2020 election and the so-called Stop the Steal campaign, which alleged that the election was fraudulent. So after the election, there was a massive campaign spearheaded by Trump to prove that the election was fraudulent. They filed 62 legal cases in jurisdictions throughout the country in front of judges, Democratic, Republican, some appointed by Trump himself. 61 out of 62 legal cases alleging fraud failed. The only one that succeeded showed that a handful of voters who were denied the right to cure ballots that had been cast without proper ID. So all that means is that there were a handful of voters that were in Pennsylvania. They all didn't have the right ID when they voted, and they were supposed to be given the opportunity to cure those ballots, which just means come up with the proper ID. And then if they come up with the proper ID, the ballot gets thrown in the pile to be counted. This was not enough people to change even the Pennsylvania vote. So effectively, all of Trump's legal efforts to overturn the election failed because when people examined the voting record, it was clean. The other outcome of the Stop the Steal election was the January 6th uprising, which attempted to block certification of the vote. The leaders of that uprising were convicted of seditious conspiracy to block a legal election. Seditious conspiracy means essentially treason. It's like a step below treason. Nevertheless, the story that the election was stolen persists. So at the midterm elections, 291 Republican candidates for major office denied the legitimacy of the election, and of those, 178 won. Arizona is one location where the efforts to prove that the election was fraudulent have continued despite all the evidence that there was no fraud whatsoever. And one of the conspiracy theories that popped up in that was the claim that 40,000 illegal ballots were smuggled from China and somehow put into the voting system. So up next, we've got a video by this guy, John Brakey, who is helping to who was a part of the effort to prove this claim that there were these votes smuggled in from China. Um, and there's a video I'd like you to watch where he explains what he alleges, and he gives his background. Um, Basically, his claim is that you can prove that the ballots came from China by finding bamboo fibers on them. And so he has legally forced the elections officials to scan all the ballots with a high resolution camera, um, so that he can allegedly find evidence of bamboo on those ballots, which would then in turn be evidence allegedly that those ballots came from China, and then evidence that they are fraudulent. So watch the video, and then I'm going to ask you to do the exercise. Let me run through the exercise questions, and then we'll go to the video. So Brakey is looking for evidence uh, that, if he found it, would serve as evidence in an argument, premises in an argument. What do you think that argument is? Write that in standard form, meaning premise, premise, draw a line, conclusion. You may have to do several steps here, right? So premise, premise, conclusion one, and then conclusion one feeds into a second argument, premise, premise, conclusion two. There are several good ways of doing it, but the thing I want you to do is carefully break down his reasoning into parts. The second question, what questions should you ask to determine if this argument is strong? That is, if the premises were true, would they support the conclusion? And here, again, I'm encouraging you to ask the questions that you would need to ask to know whether the inferences in the argument that you outlined were strong. And then finally, what do you think Brakey hopes to accomplish with this? And please, think seriously about what he's doing and why he thinks he's got evidence. And then after that, we're going to look at the reading and some theories of doubt, bullshit, and propaganda, and then we will circle back around to what Brakey is doing.